Friends and colleagues, thank you again for joining me here on the Colombia Business News Recap. Lots been happening. This has been a very eventful week. It's a week of life and death news here in Colombia. So first, let's celebrate life. After 39 days, there was a plane crash, a private plane, not a private plane, it was a charter plane. It was a small Cessna, was carrying a family back to the Amazon jungle, small town where they lived from the capital. The plane crashed and all were feared dead. A search was mounted and the plane was found after a few days. Actually, it took a few days to find the plane. That area is very sparsely populated. It is rainforest, or as we used to say, jungle. It's very thick. There are very few people, and there's practically no roads or infrastructures in most of it. But when the military and civil aviation authorities found the crashed plane, the mother and the pilot were found dead, but the four children that were in the plane were missing. So a search was mounted, but weeks went by and the kids weren't found. But enough clues were found to give the searchers hope that the kids may still be alive. And so after 39 days and searching the jungles of Caquetá and Guaviare, which are departments, administrative districts in the south of Colombia, headed towards the borders with Peru and Brazil. After 39 days, the four children were found alive and generally in good condition. They were slightly malnourished, but the Mukutui brothers and sisters, Leslie, who was 13 years old, Solani, who was 9 years old, Trin Noriel, 4 years old, and Kristen Naaman, 1 year old baby, were found alive together. The children had set off in the jungle searching, to really rescue themselves. Things would have been probably better had they stayed with the plane, but of course they did not know that. Now, these children are from indigenous communities down in the southeast of Colombia, and they had some survival skills already because they knew about how to harvest food from the rainforest, and they survived. They knew how to process yucca roots. Some places in the world it's called cassava, or tapioca. But if you just harvest that raw and you eat it, it's poisonous. It has cyanide. So you have to know how to process the roots to render it non-poisonous. And once you do, it's actually very nutritious and tasty. They knew how to do that. They knew how to harvest fruit, what you could eat, what you couldn't. There is other jungle food, for example, aquatic life and grubs and insects and things like that. Many people in the U.S., for example, are familiar with the chapulines in Mexico, the crickets that are eaten in parts of Mexico. And in Colombia, for example, not in the jungle, but actually in in Santander department, in the lovely city of Bucaramanga, the ants are a delicacy. And so people, and then you also see in Europe and parts of other countries, insects. There are people experimenting with eating insects. But in other parts of the world, it's kind of not a new thing. In parts of Asia, parts of Southeast Asia, insects are a delicacy and a street food. Parts of down here in South America as well. But we are thrilled to report the good news about the military was able to find the Mukutui brothers and sisters. They are now in a hospital in Bogota where they are being attended to. Their family has been reunited with them. Their mother, of course, died in the accident. Their grandfather is still alive, and then other people from their extended family and village in the community. So we're very thrilled to start off with that great news. Now, unfortunately, we have to turn to the the scandal that has broken out in Casa de Nariño. For those who don't know, Casa de Nariño is like the White House of uh, of Colombia. It's the presidential palace, and President Gustavo Petro's chief of staff, Lara Sanabria. Well, she was fired last week, but Lara Sanabria um, was involved in a scandal at first. Well, is involved in a scandal. The news didn't break at first, but it turns out that back in January or February, she accused her nanny, the lady that she hired to watch over her baby as she served as chief of staff to Gustavo Petro. She the nanny was accused of stealing thousands of dollars of cash that Sanabria apparently had in her apartment. Now, that would make Sanabria the victim, but the tables were turned because, as Colombian weekly news magazine Semana reported a couple months later, when they got wind of this story, the nanny was then detained for several hours. Her cell phone was taken from her. She was interrogated. She was submitted to a polygraph, lie detector test. And then it turns out, and this is where things get very, very illegal, even though what was done so far was kind of to the nanny was dubious, whether or not she actually committed the crime. But the police, an officer or somebody in the Capitol staff, or not the Capitol staff, but in the Casa de Nariño, the presidential palace staff, told a police intelligence operative that the nanny was a member or affiliate of the Clan del Golfo Mafia. Now, turns out she had no connection whatsoever to the Clan del Golfo, but they said this so that they could justify wiretapping her, because you can't just go and wiretap people without warrants and without proper permissions and things like that. That would come from the law enforcement apparatus, like the Attorney General, who is independent of the president. Now, as far as we know at this point, the president didn't have any knowledge of any of this. We don't know. There's nothing to indicate that the president was involved in any way at this point. It's possible that he could have been, but so far we don't have any. Nothing is pointing to him at this point. So anyway, the nanny gets wiretapped, which of course is illegal. She's wiretapped using the false justification that she was involved in a narco mafia, which she wasn't or isn't, or there's no proof or even evidence that she was. So now we have the police committing the illegal act of wiretapping a civilian. And then we also see that Lara Sanabria used to work for up until last week, the Colombian ambassador to Venezuela, who was Armando Benedetti. Armando Benedetti had at one point been the president of the Senate. He was the manager of Gustavo Petro's campaign for president last year. And as his kind of mermelado or little sinecure, he's given the important high-profile role of being ambassador to Venezuela. Now, Sanabria used to be his secretary, okay? And so it turns out that Sanabria goes to work for Gustavo Petro. And Benedetti thinks that her primary loyalties will continue to him, and that he now has a well-placed person inside of the Petro government. But it turns out that Sanabria is really kind of dedicated now to Gustavo Petro, and Benedetti doesn't like that. Now, the two are bickering in a series of audio recordings, Benedetti and Sanabria, and we still have a serious question of who actually recorded these, who actually leaked these. But then these also get leaked out by Semana magazine, and where we have Benedetti from Venezuela threatening to not only, well, Sanabria accuses Benedetti of making this Nannygate scandal public. So according to Sanabria, she's accusing Benedetti of that, even though she went to him apparently for help. And so did Benedetti leak this? We don't know. So maybe if Benedetti leaked this to the press, it's conceivable that Sanabria then leaks these audios of Benedetti accusing and threatening, and where he threatens that there is over $3 million of illegal campaign money in the Petro presidential campaign, which brings back echoes of Samper, the presidency back in the 1990s, which was funded by the Cali cartel. Corruption was so bad at that point, the president of Colombia lost his visa to the United States. He couldn't even visit the United States. President Clinton at the time cut off most aid to Colombia at the time because they had a president that they felt was corrupt and in the pocket of drug cartels. So now with Benedetti making these threats that he's going to expose this mysterious campaign money, and he kind of loses his temper and says, I'll sink all of us. We'll all go to jail. I'm kind of paraphrasing. You can read the article on Finance Colombia where we actually have the exact quote translated. So this audio then gets leaked. Benedetti then goes to Twitter and he tweets out and says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said. I was angry and drunk. He actually says he was drunk in the call or on the Twitter. At first, he tried to deny it. He came back several hours later and then kind of fesses up, but says that it wasn't really his fault because he was angry and he didn't mean what he said. Now, that led to Petro firing both of them. You've got it's like you're the father and you've got these two kids making a scene in the nice restaurant and you have to take them out and you can't enjoy your nice meal, something like that. But the consequences are a lot more serious. Now, we have to remember that Petro's own son, back in March, Nicolas Petro, was accused by his ex, Dave Vasquez, of receiving illegal campaign funds for Petro. Petro at the time asked the Attorney General to investigate that. Francisco Barbosa, who was no friend of Petro. Barbosa is a holdover from the Ivan Duque administration. But in Colombia, the Attorney General is not, well, the Attorney General is appointed by the president, but the Attorney General does not report to the president and is not part of the presidential administration. So, for example, when the presidency changes, the Attorney General does not necessarily change. In Colombia, it's very important under their system that the Attorney General is not a member of the president's cabinet and is independent so that he can investigate goings on in the presidency or among staff and things like that. So anyway, there's a lot going on, and the scandal turned deadly this week when Colonel Oscar Davila Torres, who was certainly involved somehow in either the wiretapping or the electronic surveillance of the nanny, he turns up dead. So he's in a car and he's with another police colleague, sends the police colleague out of the car to go and purchase a bottle of water or something. The police colleague returns after hearing a gunshot and the lieutenant colonel is dead in the car. Was it a suicide? Was it kind of an assassination? At this point, it looks like a suicide. It's set up like a suicide. Petro has come and on his Twitter that he's so fond of using and indicated that it is a suicide. But the plot certainly thickens because now this officer who was intimately involved with the allegedly illegal activity around Lara Sanabria and her nanny has turned up dead. He was part of the security detail. He was part of kind of like what the Secret Service does in the U.S., kind of like the advance team, that if the president is going to go somewhere, he's part of the team that does kind of surveillance or was part of the team that would go in advance and make sure that the area is safe for the president. So they have electronic measures that they use. They have everything from like sharpshooters that go and make sure an area is secured and things like that. He was part of that unit. I don't know if you would call it a secret unit. It kind of acted without a lot of public knowledge by design. It was not housed in a police office. It was actually housed in the headquarters of the tax authority, or not the headquarters, but a tax authority building. So it kept a low profile. But now things have turned deadly in this scandal, and the situation is grave. Petro last week, kind of dealing with this crisis, called his supporters to the street. He's a populist. This is something that he likes to do. So he called his supporters to take to the streets in his support, because Congress, in the midst of this scandal, kind of shelved the debate on his labor reform, on his health reform, on his pension reform. These are very controversial bills that would kind of rework a lot of the Colombian economy in controversial ways. So Petro is very frustrated. He's showing his frustration. He then he gave speeches after he called people out to the streets, attacking the press for doing its job and reporting on these scandals. He's accused the press of acting at the behest of his political opponents. For example, the Attorney General, who's doing his job investigating this, Petro has accused Semana and the news media more broadly of kind of being in cahoots with the Attorney General. So things have gotten kind of let's say the tone has become elevated. Petro has accused what he calls the owners of capital. He likes to use this kind of Marxist terminology, being kind of a neo-Marxist himself. The owners of capital of working to derail his grand plans for remaking the Colombian economy. Some of the protests turned violent. A police officer is now in an induced coma after he was hit with the projectile. Claudia Lopez, who actually is kind of a left-wing person herself, is the mayor of Bogota, and she's had it with Petro. She's come out and demanded that he stop inciting violence. You certainly can't accuse her of being an owner of capital or in the cabal of Alvaro Uribe or something like that. But she's really had it with the disorder and improvisation of Petro and has called him out publicly. She's kind of lost her patience with the violence and disorder, and kind of in her eyes, it seems that she accuses Petro of inciting this with calling people out to the streets and things like that. And I would say most of the protests were peaceful. However, violence did break out. There was an explosion in Medellin at the National University campus. Several streets were closed down. There were clashes between the few violent protesters from one place to another and police, even though those marchers that did come down to Casa de Nariño to hear Petro speak were not violent. So anyway, Petro has accused those of opposing him of kind of launching a soft coup, as he calls it, a golpe suave. The thing is, Petro is now kind of lashing out at his perceived or imagined enemies, but this scandal the root of the scandal is his chief of staff and his campaign manager. So I don't know how, the owners of capital or whatever kind of capitalist boogeymen, what they're doing, running his, not just his campaign, but also his political appointees to Venezuela, and also his chief of staff. So it's kind of, that's kind of, I think, a bit rich of an accusation, but there you have it. So this is rapidly evolving. Hard to say at this point where it's going to lead. But unfortunately, this it's gone beyond a political scandal into a life and death situation. We have casualties. We have a police officer that was involved in the scandal now dead. We have another police officer that was responding to rioters in a coma. An explosive hit his. My understanding is it hit his upper torso and exploded into his face. And so now he's in very serious condition. We wish him well. Moving on to kind of more, I don't want to say mundane business news, but things that are not so so grave. Uh, JetSmart is moving in to fill the void left by the collapse of Viva and Ultra Air, the two low-cost carriers that were making so much waves here in Colombia. But now JetSmart, which is a Chilean carrier, has already kind of stated its intention. It already is flying internationally between Colombia and Chile, and it has filed and gained approval from the Colombian government to start flying domestic routes here. So it looks like their business strategy is to kind of fill the void left by the departure of Viva, by the departure of JetSmart, and to be the domestic low-cost carrier here within Colombia, taking on Avianca, taking on LATAM as kind of traditional legacy domestic carriers. Now, JetSmart, which has American Airlines has backed JetSmart with investment money along with Indigo Partners, has now done a code share deal. So you are already in a limited circumstances. I think they're going to expand this and try to make it comprehensive. But you're going to be able to do code share, or you can do code share, purchase code share tickets between American Airlines and JetSmart. So now you can fly from JetSmart destinations, whether that's Colombia or Chile or Argentina, other places where JetSmart flies, and connect with American Airlines in North America. Now, American Airlines was kind of left without a partner. They used to have a partnership with LATAM, but they were caught off guard when Delta, who has not traditionally been very strong down here in Latin America, kind of made a deal. They negotiated in secret, and then when they came out, the deal was done. And sort of, it's kind of like when, you're a kid and you have, well, adults, it happens too, but, you have like a boyfriend or girlfriend, and then next thing you know, somebody steals your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you didn't even know that they were flirting. Well, that's kind of what happened with American Airlines and LATAM. So Delta kind of took LATAM away from American Airlines a few years ago, back in 2019, I think it was. So now American Airlines is back. They're back with JetSmart. They've made an investment into JetSmart already, and they're helping to fuel JetSmart's growth. So now JetSmart has good, solid financial footing, and they're hoping to take on Avianca, which also has a financial relationship with United Airlines. And they also want to take on LATAM here in the market, which, as we just mentioned, has a relationship now with Delta. And so these are still exciting times for the aviation industry. Right now, we're at a weird situation where demand for flights exceeds capacity, especially demand for low-cost flights. And so there's a hole here that that hopefully JetSmart is able to fill and to bring. We used to talk about the Viva effect, or Viva used to talk about the Viva effect, and it was kind of a real thing where they would come into a market where they would start flying a route, and then the other airlines would reduce their prices. So that was real. You could measure that, and you could see that happening. And they kind of kept a downward pressure on airfare prices, which have now shot way up down here in Colombia. So hopefully JetSmart will be as aggressive and will keep a downward pressure, or return a downward pressure to Colombian airfare. Hopefully they will do that with great service and friendly crew. And if they do, I'm sure that they will succeed and do very well down here. Moving on, Ecopetrol, the petroleum company, they own Reficar, which is the refinery of the Caribbean up in Cartagena. Chicago Bridge and Iron, CB&I, which was a U.S. company, built the refinery, and it ended up costing like twice what the original project was supposed to cost. There was scandal involved at the time. It was kind of a while ago. It was before we really ramped up here at Finance Colombia. We kind of were established back at the tail end of this scandal, so we honestly did not cover it very closely. But anyway, arbitrators just awarded Ecopetrol $1 billion against now defunct CB&I. CB&I went bankrupt even before all this happened. They had other problems, and so they're now owned by McDermott. It is still very questionable. It's not like, okay, arbitrators award you $1 billion and then tomorrow you write a check. You guys know things don't happen that way. The successors of CB&I will probably continue to fight this. But even though there's not, nobody's transferring $1 billion to Ecopetrol to their bank account tomorrow, it is a win for Ecopetrol. It does kind of vindicate them in saying that they were ripped off by CB&I. But you can expect to see more legal activity and appeals and different things happening before that case is settled, if it ever is, in fact. So lastly, I want to mention something that we're very excited about. We know that there is a challenge for companies in South America, in Latin America, in Spain, in the Caribbean, when they're trying to hire bilingual talent, when they're trying to hire people that are fluent in English, whether it's the IT sector, travel and tourism sector, contact centers. There's always a challenge to hire people who are bilingual, and whether that's in Latin America and Spain, people who are fluent in English, or whether you are in North America, Canada, United States, the Caribbean, or Europe, and you need people who can speak Spanish fluently. So we realized that has been a pain point. We've suffered it ourselves in hiring. We're always looking for people. Other business ventures I've been involved in the past where we've needed to find people, and it's difficult to find qualified bilingual talent. So to address that, we have launched EmpleoBilingue. EmpleoBilingue is the only platform dedicated to connecting bilingual talent with the employers who need it. And that might be anywhere in the world. We are very strong. EmpleoBilingue is very strong already here in the Americas. That's to say throughout Latin America, throughout North America. Obviously, Spain's in there. Lots of people signing up, especially now with the remote work modality in the post-COVID world. You don't necessarily need to be in the same office, city, state, or even country to work for an employer. And so you have people contracting across borders. But even when you need traditional employees to come into your office, it's great to see how many candidates, how many job seekers we have signing up with EmpleoBilingue in all kinds of different places in the United States, in Colombia, in Argentina, in Spain, in other countries. The platform is not geographically restricted. Applicants can apply from anywhere in the world. Employers can take advantage of the services from anywhere in the world, even though the system is very effective for, let's say, U.S. companies that are trying to hire people in the U.S. who can speak Spanish. Let's say companies down here, foreign companies that are opening down here in Colombia that need people who can speak English. And that's across sectors. Obviously, IT is a big sector. Obviously, customer contact is a big sector. Travel and tourism. You have an international hotel. You have an airline would be an obvious choice. Health services, medical tourism is a big thing. But then also kind of even not just that, but if you're in the United States, you have 60 million Latinos. There's more Latinos in the United States than there are in Colombia. There are more Latinos in the United States than there are in Spain. And not all of them even speak Spanish necessarily, but you have a large market there. And so you have a large demand in the United States for Spanish-speaking talent. EmpleoBilingue is the place to contract and to find that bilingual talent. Down here, you're doing business in Latin America. You're doing business in Europe. You need people who can speak English. You're doing business in the Caribbean. EmpleoBilingue is the place to find talent. It's the place for bilingual talent. And we're very thrilled to have launched the platform. It's part of the same group that brings you Finance Colombia and Colombia Business News Recap. It is obviously strong in Colombia, but it is not restricted to Colombia in any way. It's not a necessarily even a Colombian-focused platform. So we would encourage you to try it out. Whether you're looking for a job, try it out, or whether you're looking for talent, try it out. So friends and colleagues, thank you again for joining us. We've got a lot of good stuff in the works. I want to also welcome our editor-in-chief, Jared Wade, back. He was with us a few years ago and went off to do some other things, and we are thrilled to have him back as we are once again in growth mode. I also want to welcome some new members of our editorial staff. You guys are already familiar with Ellie Yap, who's been writing for us for several months. But then also I want to welcome Juan Guevara, Maria Lujan Sosa, and Sophia Emfeld, who are recent additions to our team. And thank you all. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you next week. Take care and be safe.